Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy2, your service team's personal coach, giving them the process, resources, and insights to deliver the perfect customer experience over the phone. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Thanks, everyone, for joining another episode of Next in Queue. Today, I am joined by Gemma Colby. Gemma is the head of CX at Yell, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Welcome, Gemma. How are you?
I'm really well. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I am fantastic. So we're going international flavor today, and you're doubling down on the international flavor for me. So let's talk a little bit about where you grew up.
So I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa. So I lived there from the age of about 4 to the age of about 28, and then decided my family are originally from the UK. And so I think I grew up knowing at some point I would move over to the UK. That's where I grew up. I'm so grateful for it. Very diverse, quite a different experience to others that people I know and work with and friends that they've had in their childhood. So I absolutely so grateful.
Yeah, I imagine that's a big change. I mean, certainly a long trip.
Yes.
What is the biggest, do you think, misconception about South Africa that people have?
Definitely, we used to grow up saying that people used to think we'd have lions in our back garden. Definitely be one of them. I think the other thing probably is, I think when people travel to South Africa, they are surprised at how advanced South Africa is. So I worked there for the first 8 or 9 years of my career. So I'm out of touch with it somewhat. I visit now as a tourist after the last 14 years of being in the UK. But I think when I look back on it, I learned so much from the time I worked in South Africa in terms of how to put customers first. And it's a very friendly nation. And I don't know how much of that comes across when you haven't visited it, but it's an incredibly friendly nation. And so I learned a lot about making people feel special and making sure your customers knew that they were really important to you. And I think I've carried a lot of that into my career beyond my time working in South Africa. So we joke, yes, it's much more developed than maybe people are thinking. It's very rural. I would love to have had maybe a giraffe in my back garden rather than a lion, but certainly it's a more advanced country than perhaps you may from the outside expect.
Yeah, absolutely. The giraffe does sound like a more friendly option than the lion, I think.
Not to say I have friends who've had experience sleeping in a tent and a lion has been close by, but it's definitely not something we would have had regularly.
I'll pass. You know what, I say that I would love to just experience some of the things that Africa has to offer from a lot of different standpoints, but certainly the wilderness standpoint. But I'm also a little chicken, so I'm not sure.
I do have to say there is something that I still feel in my soul when I land in South Africa, particularly Cape Town, having grown up there and having Table Mountain. There's that moment where it all there's just something. If you've lived on the continent of Africa, I think you carry it with you for the rest of your life. And some of that is just down to how incredibly beautiful the country is and how amazing the people are. So, yeah, I think I've carried that with me professionally and personally.
Yeah. So speaking of customers in South Africa, so where did you first start get your professional experience?
So I think one of the things that I look back on now is I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do when I finished school. None whatsoever. I didn't have a very predefined career path, and I think I've weaved my way through that as time's gone on. And so when I started, I started off in a small company that was in logistics. and our job was to make sure that we help customers get things where they needed to be. And I remember somebody saying to me, it's as simple as we need to get something from A to B. Everything else outside of that, we make more complex. The customer wants it to go from there to there. And I joined a small company that within a year or two had closed down. And so I took that experience and I had to take a job in customer services. There was customer services that was part of my first job. And I thought, I'm not sure this is for me. Well, very quickly, I realized it was exactly for me. And I loved it. I was with that company for 8 years, and that's a company called Specialized Freight Services. They don't quite look the same as they did a number of years ago. They've changed. But with them, I really grew and learned a lot that I consider the foundations of how my career started. So whether that was, our directors who had started the company from scratch themselves, rolling their sleeves up and getting on a truck and, making sure parcels were offloaded or rushing to get a tender delivered within the time frame. They taught me a lot about how we needed to make things as easy as possible for customers. And that was something I still very firmly believe. And now we see in things like effort score and, what the point at which we've all realized that you build loyalty by just making it so effortless the customer doesn't really even have to think about it. You just become a natural choice. And so the way this company found their niche was they were able to run overnight vehicles from Cape Town to Johannesburg. So suddenly a whole market opened up for them, whereas any company that was based in Cape Town that needs to get stuff to Johannesburg had to be able to fly it. And this company stepped in and they ran overnight sprinter vans between Cape Town and Johannesburg. And so suddenly things like perfumes and high value goods and things like that, just suddenly, I watched them quite young. I think when did I start there? I started, I think I was 19 or 20 when I started there. And so I just watched what was, sort of blew my mind in terms of how they went into a market and just brought it on. And we had to really follow the promise that we made at the point of sale all the way through to the service that we offered and kept those customers. And I learned a lot about customer retention in that space because, we had things go wrong. But the first thing you did, you were the one that told, proactive contact. You phoned them. You said, I'm making sure I'm the first person to tell you this. This is what I'm doing to fix it. And so now you look at a lot of the theory behind what we're doing digitally now was stuff that we did and made sure that our customers felt that we knew them, that we were on top of it for them, they could trust us, and that if we were going to get something wrong, we'd own it and we'd fix it. Those were the principles, and they hold true today, don't they? So that was how we built our client base. And I was there for some very exciting times as that client base grew and grew. And so we went from a really small office to, being able to build our own offices and watching the fleet size grow. And then we went from having a localized service provision in our different cities to saying, well, hold on, is there an opportunity to centralize some of this? And so they offered me the opportunity to move to Johannesburg and open up our national call center. I didn't know very much about call centers, but I did absolutely know their customers. And I knew what was important to them. And I knew some of the nervousness that they would have moving to what felt like a more faceless part, or a department, whereas before my team would recognize their number and know who they were speaking to, and they knew exactly, and they could, if they wanted to, they could come around and meet us. It was a very different provisioning. But I spent 18 months to 2 years doing that. And what I learned about leadership in that time and how you bring people along the journey and how you manage stakeholders and how you, make sure that in all of those things, it's easy to lose the customer. And so making sure that they stay front and center. So that's what I did. I started that up and then handed it over for somebody to run because I decided to move to the UK and thought, I'm going to try something completely different, and went into housing, which was terrifying. I thought, I'm not going to know. And housing isn't really, as it exists in the UK, isn't really a concept of an industry that we have in South Africa. So moved to London and started in London in Southern Housing Group, and started there. I landed and thought, it's my first time without a job since I'd left school type thing. So I just was, I have to get a job. I was very nervous, and got into housing and met some incredible people who are some I'm still friends with now, who showed me the way. And through that, I was there for a couple of months, and I saw that they had a role that was doing business improvement, and so applied for it. Not because I'd had any business improvement experience per se as a role, but I realized all the things I'd loved about my job previously had been changing processes, improving things, understanding what was going on for customers. And so I looked at this role and I went, oh, I'm gonna apply for this. I can't go in saying, and I wouldn't, because it wasn't true. I went in saying, I haven't done this job as it stands, but let me tell you why I think I can. And yeah, so then did that, and I got the job, and I loved it. I went into business improvement, and I had an incredible team around me that I worked with. So there was a small team of us, and I learned so much from my boss and from my two colleagues at the time around how to, deliver improvement based on data. It was all systems thinking based. So I just learned so much. And then that was at Southern, and I wanted to go and see whether I could apply that somewhere else. And I got a job at Catalyst Housing, another housing association based with a head office in West London, and did that. And I was there for about 2 years doing improvement type activity. And we also, while I was doing that, we delivered now I would call it customer experience training, but then it was business improvement training. I don't think we'd really figured out that it was really about the customer experience. And so did some of that at Catalyst as well. But after a couple of years of doing improvement activity, I got the opportunity to lead a call center again. And I thought, I wonder how differently I would do it now with everything I've learned. From moving, from doing improvement roles, being able to think more strategically, and learning all of that. And so I went and I did that, and I led a call center at Catalyst for just shy of 3 years. And it was incredible. I had such a multicultural team around me who, when I got there, I think hadn't necessarily been given permission, both verbal and non-verbal permission, to really care about the customer. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's see what that looks like, and you're going to help us shape that. And so we did that for 3 years, myself and my team. And I was very sad to leave there, but I realized that my heart belonged in much more strategic projects and business improvement, all down to customer and colleagues. If it's not going to do something right for your customer and for the people serving those customers, you shouldn't be doing it. But I felt that was where I could make the biggest impact. So then moved to Yale in December 2015. And then after being with Yale for a few years, about 2.5 years ago now, I got the opportunity to start up the customer experience team. And that's the team I'm leading now. And, I was actually saying this to some colleagues yesterday. It's definitely the happiest I've been and the most fulfilled I've been in my time at Yale.
That's fantastic. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yes.
But I want to go back to when you were at Specialized Freight and you were making that transition from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and the call center was now centralized, like you said, right? People couldn't just necessarily come around the corner and see you.
Yeah.
What was the biggest secret to making that work and yet still deliver what seemed like a really personalized experience? How did you go about accomplishing that?
So I think there were two facets to it. One was managing my internal stakeholders. There was definitely some nervousness about moving. Some people weren't completely, oh, this is going to be amazing, let's move it central. They were worried we were going to lose the personal touch. I think the fact that I knew the customers and I knew what they needed meant that I was able to transfer that, and I didn't completely lose the personalization element. I took big accounts and I made sure I did a handover to those people with the relevant people, because we didn't lose the staff on site. They just became escalation points rather than the front line. So I made sure that those working relationships were really strong. So suddenly the personal transfer of knowledge that had to happen was really strong. This is making me think back now when I think back on this time. So they had to have really, really strong relationships, and to make sure the customer information wasn't lost between them. I did make sure that bigger customers had a personal point of contact with backup. So you do all that kind of usually, not a single point of failure. But so I made sure that happened, and it was lots and lots and lots of relationship building and knowledge transfer. I think was probably, if I look back on that, I don't think we had the digital ways to do it back then. I'm making myself sound quite old. I feel like it when I did this, but it was a little while ago now. It was coming up to 20 years ago. Gosh. So there
I
was
know.
Yes, I know. Doesn't that make you just take a moment? Yes, yeah. It was a little while ago, but we had a lot. We had to rely quite a lot on our own processes and making sure customers knew exactly who they could contact if they were a customer that we needed to provide that for. And that I had really robust processes in place for customers who maybe didn't need that level of support, but when they came in, they didn't feel a difference in the service that they were getting, which meant that I had to bring all the local teams and the central team on board together, which is why when I was talking about it earlier, I'd say it was around leadership for me. That was really, really important to make sure that culturally they knew what we were trying to achieve. Customers weren't just a number, and that they knew where to go to get support, and that everybody was geared up to deliver that support and help them.
Yeah, there's definitely, I'm hearing like, make sure everyone's on the same page. Yeah. Right. We're all on the same page, and it's all about the customer, and this is how we're going to make that work. And I think those plans are really important, and certainly missteps will happen along the way. But if you have that plan and you have that communication and everyone's on the same page, you can definitely make it work.
I think there's also something about where you have, so I see it now with Yale, where we have the different tiers of customers, so you have certain customers who you set certain expectations with, and it's making sure that whatever you set that expectation to be at the very beginning of the journey, that it transfers through to carry on through the rest of the journey. So making sure, and we had very close working relationships. It was even more critical. It happened organically when we were local in the local branches, but when we were central, it was absolutely critical that I maintained those relationships as well across the end-to-end journey. I'm not sure I knew why I was doing it at the time. I just knew that it ultimately made a better experience. So now when I look back on it, I go, actually, there's learning there, isn't there?
Yeah. So then you take this big move. And I know you said your family was from the UK. So it's 10,000 kilometers for my highly US viewership. It's 6,000 miles. It's a long trip. Was this the entire family moving and you were going with? Was this just you? What prompted that?
So it was, I don't have children. I don't have children now. So there was no children to move, but it was myself and my partner, or my ex-partner. And we moved over because we were 27, 28 at the time. And I think there was an itchy feet. Let's go and see what's out there in the world. I think when you grow up in a country and your parents and some of your family aren't in the same country you are, it immediately, from a very young age, makes you grow up with an awareness that the world's a lot bigger. And so for me, it was a case of, I wanted to go and see what that was like. I wanted to go and see what more there was. I thought it would be for 2 years. I thought, I would have been back in South Africa. Life hasn't played out that way. And I'm very firmly in the UK now, and I don't see myself moving back to South Africa. It will always have a very treasured spot in my heart, but it won't be where I live out the rest of my life. So I think what made me do it, I don't think I even really knew how big a thing it was at the time. it was a given. We were doing it. We were, quitting jobs, buying plane tickets, off we go. And so got to the UK, and in particular London. When you've grown up in Cape Town, and it's quite vibrant and a bustling city, but not to touch on the scale of London, and you get out there and you think, wow, there's so much to this. So just jumped with both feet and thought, well, if this doesn't work, we'll deal with that when we get there.
Yeah, the crazy things we do in our 20s, right? You just go, we'll figure it out. It's fine. Let's just
I don't think
hop on a plane.
Don't think I truly appreciated the magnitude of what I was doing.
So then this switch to housing.
Yeah.
What were the things that you found just transferred directly over skill-wise, or how you went about doing things? And what were the things that were really new for you that you really had to spend time kind of figuring out?
That's a great question. I think the stuff that was transferable was customers are customers, people are people. The ability to spend time with a call center or a team serving customers, albeit face to face, immediately there was a set of, well, I know how to treat customers to get the best out of the situation. I know how to, very, very briefly in the beginning of my time in housing, was dealing with high level complaints. That felt like putting on a familiar pair of gloves. There was ability to read something and tease out what it was that was making the customer unhappy, and then working out what needed to be addressed. So I think customers are the familiar thread, and knowing how to listen to them and help, and that analytical ability to figure out what they need and how you're going to get that for them. So I think that was there. I think although it's not a transferable skill, it's definitely something I brought and bring into every job, is the passion for customers. And that applies to any industry. I believe that even now. I'm not precious about what industry you've come from. If you come with a healthy dose of passion for customers, the rest will flow. The stuff that was different, housing in general was completely different. I remember having a session with somebody where we sat down and he was trying to explain housing to me and how lettings worked and how this worked. And I remember thinking, I am never going to understand all of this. I was only 3 months in, if I give myself a break. And so I think that was different. I think I maybe a bit naively thought that, there's nothing more personal than your house and where you live and your home. And so I thought I would meet a whole lot of people who that was their biggest focus, front and center. But it didn't work out that way. I met loads of people who that was completely true of, people who'd made a profession in housing, and because they had grown up in social housing and wanted to go on and create communities and homes for people, they were really inspirational. But a lot of people who've been absolutely bogged down by bureaucracy and needing to meet tick certain tick boxes and do all of those things. So that was coming from a small company that grew, and where we had to put structure in place, to a very, very structured, well established, which comes with certain red tape and certain things that you needed to do. It meant that in some cases it was a bit slower to make the change that you wanted to, and that took some adjusting for me, and ultimately is one of the considerations in me moving out of housing all those years later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you moved on to Yale, which for people in the US, right? It's the Yellow Pages. For those of you old enough to remember the Yellow
Yes.
Pages, I think there's a whole generation now that has no idea what we're talking about. But tell us a little bit about that business and kind of what your customer experience role entails for that business.
So if we start with Yale, you're right, there's a generation of people who who maybe have some nostalgia through their parents around the Yellow Pages and what that is. And it's a big part. I remember it in South Africa. It was a big part of my childhood, of that big book rocking up on your door. Same in the UK. There is lots of nostalgia around it. Really, our purpose at Yale is to connect businesses and consumers brilliantly. And that was true of the Yellow Pages, and it's true to what we do today. For us as a business, it's about bringing businesses, small to medium generally. We have bigger customers as well, but small to medium business together with people who want to buy their goods, use their services, and do that in a way that really fosters that relationship. And so I quite like that. I think there's nothing more brave than starting your own business. And that's how I tie my personal values tie in. We're helping people make an economy really and thrive and do all of that. So I think that's very exciting. We now don't do it through the Yellow Pages anymore, but we do it through digital advertising and products. So everything from websites to a product that we have, which is Smart Performance, which will go out and really put you in the right places to get leads to come to you. So right now it's still doing that same thing around connection and doing that really well. And we have our Yale products, which is comes with a listing, but also a whole host of other features, like you can get your consumers to message you now through our platform. They can find you in different places, like through Apple Business Chat. And so there is lots that we're doing, and it's very, very exciting to get that to customers and have them connect that way. So in terms of my role there, it's to make sure that we are learning from what our customers are saying. I very much say to my team, we need to be the voice of the customer coming into the business at all levels and talking about their experience, which I love. I think that I'm always really, really interested in that, and it's powerful. You can't listen to the voice of a customer and go, oh, I'll just ignore that. It's really powerful. And so that's one of the powers, I think, that one of the areas we've really focused on as a team. And then equally we take that and review end-to-end journeys, creating digital experiences, working as well with our product teams, because it's the overall customer experience we're interested in. So we're feeding back, we're working with them, we're launching those new products and designing the journeys that wrap around those. And then also we make sure that whatever we are changing within the customer experience, we're taking it out to the market well, and then learning from what we're taking it out to the market as. So there's a lot going on in my team. It's quite a small team. There's 11 of us in total, but we're trying to work out the best way to make an impact to our customers through the rest of the business.
So a lot of companies have what we call tchotchkes, right? Little things that are branded that you can give to customers or potential customers. I'm wondering if at Yale, you guys have any booster seats that are branded, because that's what I remember the phone book being used for when I was a kid.
I may take that to our marketing team and ask them. I love that.
When you needed to sat at the grandparents' dining room table, you just slapped a phone book or two on there, depending on the age, so that you could, be up high enough. Yeah.
Well, there is a great advert that can be found on YouTube, which is a Christmas Yellow Pages advert. Do you know the one I'm referring to?
I don't.
So it's a young boy, and he's got mistletoe, and the only way you can reach the young girl to give her a Christmas kiss is by stepping on some Yellow Pages. It's great.
I'm going to have to look for that. We may have to link that in the liner notes, because for those of you that don't remember Yellow Pages back in the day, that book was really big and thick and heavy, and you would get a new one, like, I don't know, every 6 months or so, and just show up on the doorstep. And that's, before the internet, that's how you found phone numbers.
It was. And I think that, as you're saying, there's still a generation that likes something in their hand, but the majority of people want it on at their fingertips in terms of the end of their phone. So it's us looking at how we fit into that marketplace and making a space for it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about, I feel like, so number one, we met through LinkedIn. And I see LinkedIn doing a really good job of connecting people lately and building communities of people like-minded. But you've also gotten into a community that is on LinkedIn, but separate from LinkedIn. So tell us about that community, and did the events of 2020 really impact that, or was that coming along before then?
Yeah. So it's the Women in CX community, and I'm a very proud beta founding member of Women in CX. So Claire Muscat, who is the founder of Women in CX, was, an incredibly busy CX professional, got a significant CV in terms of her experience, and she was traveling all around the world talking about customer experience prior to COVID, and then suddenly no more travel, no more going out, no more talking about these things. And she started reaching out to people via social media and speaking to women. So there's a Great Women in CX podcast, and she started speaking to women across customer experience and realized that there was this great opportunity for a community to help promote customer experience, and for women in customer experience in particular. And I went along to a webinar, which very likely I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to if it hadn't been for COVID. And Claire was one of the people presenting. And we kicked off in March, just over a year ago, on International Women's Day. And it was probably about a month or two before that, and they were in the very first stages of building. And I think it was 11 members at that point, where Claire had met them through reaching out on social media. And they had a very small list of numbers that they could allow in. I think it was meant to be 40, and they got such a response that they allowed 50. And so I was one of those members. And so it was a community-led development of whatever we wanted it to be, to make it be with them. And so it was a very collaborative process for creating that. And I would if I look back on my last year, when I reflected on the year that was, Women in CX is one of my personal highlights, as well as one of my professional highlights. But it was because it's this incredible community of these amazing people. And I believe that when you promote each other, nobody loses. And that's really one of the themes that runs through the community, in terms of building that platform to raise people up. And it's very open, and let's share. And if I have a challenge or I want to share something, that's where I go to. And it's an incredibly powerful community. And we've now had a couple of in-person meetups. Claire's back to traveling around the world. She's just been to the States, and I think she went to Amsterdam and also she went to Spain. So she's just getting to see what is just this incredible community of women that's built up. And we are worldwide. When you see the map of where we are across the continent, it's from Australia to Africa, all the way across to the States. We really are bringing that community and sharing what is always surprising, how many things that we have in common. Whether that be how we build our own confidence and put ourselves out there, all the way through to the challenges that we face in building and promoting the customer experience as an area of expertise that is so important for companies.
Yeah, I feel like, right, the promise of the internet was that we would all be connected and have all of this information. And for the last 30 years, it's been really just a hot mess. And over the last couple of years, in some areas, I think we've really seen like the promise of that, with people connecting and then being able to share experiences, to learn from each other, and then also develop real world connections and friendships where they can meet in person and do things. And COVID, I think, was a really difficult thing for just about everyone, the entire world. But if there's one silver lining that's come out of it, I feel like we a lot of people like really just decided, hey, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to work on creating a different kind of community.
Yeah.
And that's what I've seen.
And I think you're exactly right. If I think back to how I would have approached it, or whether I would have been open to it, or how I would have been looking for it, I just don't think it would have been a thing for me prior to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's just so natural. It's so natural that I dial into a Zoom call and, share these things and get so much value out of it. So I think you're right. I think if we're more and more as time goes on now, look back and reflect on what we've taken and what we've left behind and what we've kept with us from COVID, and the ability to create those sorts of communities and connections is a thing I do think that will keep with us. I absolutely think in a lot of cases where you can back it up with in-person connection, it cements it. And I certainly feel that way when we've had in-person meetups. But equally, there are people I don't know whether I'll ever meet in person yet. I feel a connection with too. So yeah, it's powerful, really, really powerful. And I think it's a gift from COVID, whether we were forced into the situation or not. I think looking for a silver lining in what we've taken out of it, I think this is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, certainly we wouldn't be here talking, I don't think, if it weren't for that, because this was certainly born out of kind of the same idea. So speaking of professional accomplishments,
I always get so I'm going to blush. I always get so embarrassed when people bring this up.
That's okay. I think it's okay to be a little bashful when you win such a prestigious award that you won CX Leader of the Year. Yeah. Tell me what that experience was like.
Well, when I watched back the video of me accepting the award, and there was just that awkward moment where I was like, say something, let words come out your mouth. I was so shocked. I think it was incredible. I think it'll be one of those things I only really look back on and understand the opportunities it will have presented me. So it's in recognition. So the UK Customer Experience Leader of the Year, I think, incredible. I'm so proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of all the work that we've done at Yale that put me in a position to even be considered for it. And that was really putting the customer at the heart of what we're doing and having those conversations about what that looks like in our products, in our service, in how we report, in what we talk about. It really was a complete transformation of how we looked at that. And when I say the time I've spent doing this role, this is a big part of it, because I'm supported by a great team, senior leaders who really do get it, which I always feel a bit grateful for when I'm talking to other CXs, when they say, well, how do we prove that this is important? I have great senior leaders who do believe it's really important and put their money where their mouth is as such. But it meant that we were able to go in and really transform the way that we showed up for customers, which then meant that we were able to go and share that best practice through the awards process. I didn't expect to win at all. If you watch that video, I'm shocked, but incredibly proud and delighted that it's something that I've been able to take back to Yale. It's a recognition of the work I've done, which I'm very proud of, but also the work we've done together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a team behind it, but it really feels good that you can share that recognition, right?
Yeah. It was the first time in our 55-year history that we put ourselves forward for service or experience awards. And so I won that, which was incredible. And then we also threw in the UK, the Institute of Customer Service. They have the UK Customer Satisfaction Awards. And in the same year, the same sort of award season, we won an award for one of our products as the Customer Innovation Award, which was incredible. So we had a nice rounded award season, which we were very proud of, and built lots of really good feeling that the hard work you're doing is being recognized in the industry.
So speaking of that customer innovation, like what do you see as kind of the either what you're working on today or what's around the corner? What are you looking at going, This is either we need to do this right now and let's go, or that's right around the corner and we need to keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, so I went to a session the other day around AI and how that shows up for customers, and it really reinforced one of the things that I've been thinking about for our customers is how we show up in a personalized and proactive way. So I think we've got small to medium business owners who are busy. During the day, they're cutting hair, they're up ladders, they're under cars, they're doing the things that make our lives work. And they may not have time to be on the phone to us. And so they want us to, one, if they come and speak to us, recognize who they are. This is things that brands that are doing it right are doing already, that we recognize who they are. We can proactively identify what it is that they need before they need it and offer it up to them. I judged for the International Customer Experience Awards last year, and I saw, the company that won in Turkey, Turkcell, they did some great things with their bot rocking up and saying, you're here in your contract, let me show you what you can do. Or, it just was, I recognize you, I know what you need, I understand your journey, I understand you. And because I think what I've learned is it's not just about designing proactive experiences that sort of then sheep dip customers. You need to know them so well that you get the experience that's right for you, and it needs to be data led, and it needs to feel like we know you really well, and therefore we can offer something up for you. So I think that, and it was the presentation that I saw Claire give when I registered my interest in women in CX, which was, COVID has forced a lot of us to become much more digital. But often we've become more digital based on our needs, not necessarily the customer's needs. And I think we've really challenged ourselves to make sure that what we're doing digitally shows up for our customers well. But it's a challenge when you've done everything really, as businesses, that they've done things really quickly. So we're talking a lot about how we help customers get the most out of their advertising, but in a very personalized way that's relevant to them and the products that they have. So I think I don't think companies that are doing it well make it look effortless already, but I think there's still lots to do in that space. And I think that's one of the things. I think proactive on its own is not good enough. Personalized and proactive is where we need to be thinking.
Yeah. It strikes me that we're always trying to, in some ways, replicate the experience, maybe, right, going back to when you were at Specialized Freight, right? That personalized experience where that person, right? When they call in and you answer the phone, you recognize the voice.
Yep.
And you know who they are, and you have a good idea of why they're calling today.
Yep.
We're just always trying to replicate that at scale. Like how do we do that, and how do we do it at scale, and how do we leverage technology to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, you couldn't be more right. If I think back to my very first job where I was very excited by recognizing the number, and I knew my top customers' numbers, and if that number, I picked it up and I went, hey, I know who you are, and I know what you need, and I know exactly what's going to happen because I know that. So you're right. It's trying to scale that is something else, and that's our challenge. It's doable, but I think it's only going to work well when it's based on replicating that connection with that customer.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, Gemma, it has been absolutely my pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time, and it's late for you, so thank you.
You're very, very welcome. I very much enjoyed it.